Hi, it's Kennie here. New around here, welcome. Not new around here, what is up, home skillet biscuit? It was a mere few weeks ago that I came on here talking about Worst Ex Ever Season 2. And in that short of time, they decided to come out with yet another iteration of the Worst Blank Ever franchise. This time, Worst Neighbor Ever. If you're unfamiliar with this series of docu-series now, they are Blumhouse produced docu-series on Netflix. They've had 2 seasons of Worst Roommate Ever and 2 seasons of Worst Ex Ever, both of which about bad roommates and bad exes, if you can imagine. Like I said, but a few weeks ago, I was talking about the 2nd season of Worst Ex Ever, and then it was brought to my attention that they were coming out with a new one called Worst Neighbor Ever, which was released on July 1st. And I watched it immediately. It's another 4-part docuseries, each episode focusing on a different case and a horrible circumstance of a neighbor. I don't know what it is about this particular. I've seen a lot of true crime. I've always been morbidly fascinated with how awful humanity can be. There is something about these last 4 episodes that hit different. I think there's something to do with the randomness of it. If you're unfamiliar, the docuseries is a true crime docuseries. That's what makes them so bad. It's not just like some tea, like, oh, he was cheating. No, somebody died. It's often major crime of some sort that may include robbery, SA, identity fraud, false imprisonment, DV, murder, cash. And that is harrowing in its own right. But Worst Roommate and Worst Ex insinuate a certain closeness, like you were living with this person, you were dating this person. This isn't just some random person, right? Which is bad enough. But Worst Neighbor shakes to the core because it literally could just be some nigga you live next to one day just woke up and that's it. It's very random. And it's also a thing that a lot of people don't tend to think, or at least me, I don't tend to think about when I move into a new area. Partially because I don't plan to talk to them niggas. I guess my neighbors have been fine up until now. I don't know. My old neighbors were fine as far as I knew. The only interactions I had is in the hallway, and the one above me, they used to be stomping. Maybe I should have called somebody more. But I don't plan to talk to them. I don't plan to do things. The only neighbors that I did talk to were people that lived in the building that had cute dogs, and I always liked to bribe the dogs with treats. But as far as just like knowing my neighbors, no. And it's never a thing that I really plan to consider either. So with that said, viewer discretion is advised. If you didn't garner that from this information, these are true crime cases. And if that's not a thing that you think you can handle, that is totally fine. See y'all in the next one. Love you. Peace. Bye. Peace on Mother Earth, whatever. But for those of you that are like, oh, Kendall, I kind of watch it through you because you are able to make it lighter. I want the information, but I don't want to be bummed out all day. I don't know if I can guarantee that today. Because these ones bum me out. They hit different. I don't know. Especially episode 3, that shit got me. I was like, wow, is there a tear? Like a soul tear coming out of my right eye? Like, oh, I needed a break after that one. So yeah, viewer discretion, murder, crime, racism, racial violence, any of those things that you might find disturbing, again, consider for yourself and make the decision that's right for you, friend. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. What have you guys been up to recently? I have been reading a book. A horror book. I haven't read horror in a very long time. I collect a lot of horror books because I love the ideas of them. And so I have them all over the place. And currently I'm building a library, or I'm about to start building the shelves for a library in my home. And so I want to make my way through reading all of the books that I've collected and didn't read, even though this is a new one. I bought a new one to collect and not go the way through. So this one is called The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. And I've been very much so enjoying it. I'm not done. I'm about halfway through. So far, at least, it's about a college girl who's a freshman who's going through a really rough time because her dad woke up one day and decided he didn't care about his family anymore and left her mom for another woman. And then like 3 months after that, her mom comes home with a white man saying, white people don't treat their wives bad. Lo and behold, he's the worst. He's the worst sexist, racist, misogynistic. He has all the fetishes for Asian women. He sucks ass. But the daughter becomes kind of obsessed with them in this like murderous way where she's like, I really want his blue eyes. And she hasn't eaten him yet, but I'm not 100% sure that she's not going to. Again, I'm only halfway through. So that's what I've been reading. While you guys figure out what you're going to do while I yabber on, whether you're going to knit, crochet, whether you're going to fold some laundry, wash some dishes, clean your living room, clean your bedroom, eat dinner, while you figure that out, I'm going to send us over to Admiral Kennie. Thank you. Hello everyone, it's Admiral Kenny, and today's video is sponsored by ZocDoc, the free-to-use app and website that allows you to search for doctors in your area in a myriad of different fields and specialties. Let's face it, none of us are getting any younger, in the words of Eartha Kitt when she was Yzma. No, Lady Eloise, Boomerang. Anyway, none of us are getting any younger. And the part of aging healthfully and gracefully and hopefully without just breaking down at 32 is having a system of people in your healthcare ecosystem, I guess. For those of you that don't know, I recently moved, so I have to completely build up that new ecosystem, which is a very daunting task, but it was made a lot easier when I realized that I had ZocDoc at my disposal. Essentially, you can go in there, compare doctors, get real patient reviews, filter by specialty, availability, who takes your insurance. But one of the best parts about it is that you can set that appointment in app. You can do it right there. And most of those appointments, whether or not you're a new patient, can happen within 24 to 72 hours. So if you're feeling like poop, there is nothing worse than going to a doctor and they're like, yeah, we can't see you for 3 weeks. I feel like garbage now. You can search by specialty. So again, if you're trying to build your ecosystem like I am, there's more than 100,000 healthcare providers on there. So you're sure to find someone that treats what ails you. So if you would like to check out ZocDoc, feel free to click on the link down below and take control of your health today. Big thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery. Like the other iterations of the show, it is in 4 parts. Again, I don't know what it is. It's just people that you either don't know at all or just are mildly aware of, tangentially related to, and they just wake up one day across the street from you and decide to give you hell. Episode 1, she finally snapped. So this case opens up interestingly in that we know part of the ending at the beginning. It opens with a woman named Shauna telling us that in 2018, she was shot in the face, and she's obviously alive to tell it. The bullet went through her nose and out her ear, and surprisingly, not only is she alive, but she was also able to get numerous reconstructive surgeries, and visually she looks pretty well. I don't think you would look at her and know, like, yeah, she had been shot in the face about 10 years ago. If you want to know how we got here, we have to go to a place called Mount Sterling, Kentucky, where Shauna and her husband Dave lived with their family. They had come down from Ohio because Shauna wanted to be closer to her family and live on the street where a bunch of her other family lived as well. The entire street had a bunch of different houses that had different people as a part of her family on that block, which must have felt very close-knit, very safe. You'll notice all of these start of land, like, it was such a safe neighborhood. Everyone got along. We had such great relationships. I don't know how this could have happened. Girl. Dave didn't have a very close relationship with his family, so he felt very at home with Shauna and her extended family, and they were all very welcoming. I think it's important to note that Dave is Black, and I noticed within 10 minutes that Dave is Black, and I have yet to see him be interviewed. He's Black in a close-knit suburban community in Kentucky. Some tell me this man is dead. We are introduced to a woman named Frances. She had been a friend of Shauna's cousin for years, but Shauna wasn't particularly close to her. She did remember Frances staying with Shauna's grandmother quite a bit to escape family problems, which were quite vague and never really addressed. The most that Shauna seemed to know was that her mother wasn't very good to her, but she was so frequently over the grandmother's house and just the house in general that the family kind of called her a niece, even though they weren't related. Eventually, she would go off, start a life, get married, get divorced, and eventually find her way back to Mount Sterling. And she wanted to buy a property on the other side of the street from Shauna and David. She wanted to be where she grew up. She would need some time to get her living space remodeled before she could move in, and she would ask Shauna if it were okay for her to stay with them while that happened, to which Shauna was more than open to. Shauna thought it would be good company for her, given that David worked and Shauna was on disability, so she couldn't work. Her children were also adults now and out of the house, so she was like, it would be good to have a gal pal to go shopping with, hang out with, go to movies with, and they did that, and they had a good time at first. Frances had, again, as my mama would call it, that takeover spirit, aka niggas feel too comfortable to demand shit in somebody else's Francis's house. She would start taking the remote when Dave and Shauna were watching TV and changing the channel, unplug the vacuum when Shauna was vacuuming, basically saying, it's too loud, you shouldn't be vacuuming right now, as if she don't have a right to vacuum in her own goddamn house whenever the fuck she wants to. She started getting short with people, irritable, irritated, snappy. But the kicker, or what would have been the kicker for me, is that she was really proud of her appearance on a YouTube video titled, quote, Islamophobic protester leads national anti-Muslim rally, where Francis, in a very Westboro Baptist fashion, goes on an unintelligible screed about Muslims, gay people, and she starts dropping slurs. Again, this video she would show joyously, pridefully to Dave and Shauna. Dave never liked the bitch, but that was his final straw. He was like, I want her ass out my house. And Shauna was like, ugh, yeah, she might be a little racist. Doesn't kick her out. She's a victim too, but I call it like I see it. Shauna had a daughter named Haley who would come to visit her mother. I believe she lived out of state. When she came to visit her for the first time in a while, she saw this random woman in her house and she was like, who the hell is this? And she was like, oh, this is Frances. She's staying with me for a while. And just pretty much immediately, she would come to visit her mother. She came with her son, so Shauna's grandson. And she was like, we felt unwelcome in my mother's home.
Kind of felt like we didn't belong. She made us very uncomfortable.
Because this random bitch, Frances, made us feel so unwelcome. She seemed to have an issue with the son who was 3 years old and doing 3-year-old shit. The theory is that she had a problem with the attention being taken away from her. The final straw seemed to be that at some point Frances yelled at the child, and that was the final straw. They kicked her out. 2 months later, she would reappear at the new home across the street. And when she came back, she obviously had a vendetta. And those vendettas weren't just to Shauna. It was with the entire family, it would seem. But Shauna got the brunt of the ire, Shauna and Dave. She would have property disputes with Shauna's grandfather, where she tried to build a driveway through his property line. Granddad didn't play that shit and somehow got heavy machinery to drop cars on her driveway, which is creative and hilarious. But notably, as far as we can tell in this storyline, she ain't go up against Granddad, scary bitch. Instead, she was hyper focused on Shauna because I guess that's who she locked on to. She started stalking Shauna, following her to the tanning salon that she would go to that her friend owned. And Frances would report Shauna to Social Security saying that she was lying about her disability and that she was actually employed at this tanning salon trying to get the friend in trouble. So Shauna went over to her house and said, bitch, what is your issue? To which Frances Nutass just laughed and taunted her with, I did it because I can. And so, as I've said before, when one does ass beatable offenses, they can't be surprised when they get their ass beat. And so Shauna beat her ass, and as she should. David would come and pull her off of Frances, but regardless of how David did not engage in this assault, Frances decided to call the police, saying that Shauna was threatening to kill her and that David had actually participated in the assault, jerking Frances to the ground and let Shauna beat her ass, beat her in the face, beat her with a hoe? I just feel like, bitch, don't give me ideas. I didn't do that, but I can. Police would come and see that she didn't have any of these injuries that would be consistent with such a violent crime as she was claiming. But that didn't stop her from getting a neck and arm brace the next day. Real Vince McMahon of her. But she would go so far as to formally press charges against Shauna, and she would be arrested 2 weeks later. I wouldn't do that because I already beat your ass. You want me to finish the job? All right, cool. But she would be let out pretty quickly afterwards. I think my theory is that people were like, yeah, we know her. She probably deserved that ass beating. I ain't gonna lie. But she would be let out, and Frances was pissed that she was released. So she called the jail demanding that she be put in jail for 18 months. She would continue escalating when they didn't do that, calling the state police, then the FBI, then the DOJ, and finally issued a personal letter to Trump. 3 months out of jail as they wait for trial, because again, Frances wanted to go to trial, Shauna would have a restraining order set on her from Frances, which must be difficult considering they live across the fucking street. Nigga, what does that even mean? Even if Shauna was truly a danger to this woman unprovoked, what the fuck is an across the street restraining order gonna do? Y'all can't get here quick enough to stop me from beating her ass from across the street. So Shauna, with the restraining order, Shauna was very diligent. She was like, I don't feel feel like hearing her shit. She want any opportunity to call the police on me she can find. So that means she couldn't mow her lawn, couldn't go to her own mailbox. And Frances, when realizing she wasn't going to purposely violate the restraining order, wanted to goat her. She started calling her biracial daughter slurs. But Shauna nor Dave was biting. So she said, I'll bring the harassment to you, because she had this like delusion that she was being harassed by them. And when they wouldn't come over to harass her, she went over to harass them. Because that's what it felt like. That felt like reality to her. And she would start calling the police for everything, because one of the family members was putting their garbage away at night. She accused them of stealing her bird feeder, her purse, which she would later call back saying that she found in the back seat. She would say that they're recording her, which honestly, I would too. You nut bitch, keep calling the police every time for no fucking reason. I'm gonna record you. She called because they were lighting fireworks on the 4th of July. Called the police on Dave because he went to visit his father-in-law across the street, who happened to live next door to Frances. And she took that as a threat, I guess, for which she ran up on him, banging on his car window, calling him names, recording him, telling him to come out so she can get him, blah, blah, blah. And Shauna was like, we should call the police. But Dave, who was a deputy police something or other, a jailer or something, he said, they ain't gonna do shit. That's sad. Nigga that's working with the police person that probably know the best than anybody else. Also, Dave was generally non-confrontational and was like, I just don't want to engage with her. But again, she kept escalating. Within 5 months, again, she's still stalking Shauna, following her to Kroger's. The thing that was truly, I did not see that shit coming, was when Shauna would say that she'd be outside with her own grandchildren, and Frances would come outside topless or butt naked to mow her lawn. Just, again, to antagonize them. I don't know what goal or plan she had with that. Hey, you mad at me? Look at these titties. I don't know what the purpose of that was. Just to freak them out. And also because you're in front of kids. Put your titties away. Fucking weirdo. She would call the police and they said, well, it's her property. She can be naked on her own property. We can't really do anything about that. As things were escalating, Haley would get more and more uncomfortable about her kids spending time at grandma's house, because obviously something's going on with this nut bitch and I don't think it's safe. So Haley and Shauna would get into it. Essentially, like, they would not be on speaking terms for a while, because Shauna was like, why can't I see my grandchildren? I think you're being dramatic about it. And Dave was the only person that said, like, no, I completely understand why you're doing this. Yeah, you do what you need to do to keep your children safe. Now, I would also like to inform you guys that Frances was not simply harassing this family. She was also harassing those working in her favor on the case against Shauna. The prosecutors would have a witness who was getting calls and paragraphs from Frances telling her to report false claims, harassing her, calling her day and night. The prosecutor would end up reaching out to this witness and she was like, let me tell you something. If they ask me, what is she doing? What is she like? I'm going to tell the judge that she's harassing me. And something tells me that's not going to be great on her case when somebody came up and beat her ass for harassing them. And so the prosecutor's office went to Shauna and offered her a plea deal, which was basically anger management and 1 year probation. And Frances would find out about this, and girl, she was pissed. She didn't have much mind to lose, but she lost what was left of it. Basically claiming that Shauna is married to David and his very vague connections to law enforcement were the reasons why they weren't going harder on Shauna, and not because I think people knew you was fucking annoying, and it explains why someone would want to beat your ass. I don't know that. That's alleged. That's just my reading of the situation. You are unlikable, and they couldn't make that ass whooping not sound warranted in front of a trial, in front of a jury who would perceive you, that would see the type of person you are. But again, she was escalating, believing that she was being tormented by them, even though, again, she was the one coming up to their windows, walking around butt naked outside in front of their grandchildren, harassing them, yelling slurs from across the street, you know, but she's the victim. With everything escalating, Dave decided to get security cameras for the home. And while installing those cameras, they would catch Frances. She had called the police saying that they are tormenting her, harassing her day in, day out. They're doing nothing to save her. So she has to take things into her own hands. So Frances would walk across their lawn, walk into their home, pull out a gun, and shoot Shauna in the face and shoot Dave on the patio. When the police were called, they were even able to put together that I was Frances before the name was said. When people were calling about a shooting, they were like, was it Frances?
Okay, but they've been dealing with the year. Can you tell me if it's Frances there?
And I'm like, if you think it's Frances, bitch, why ain't y'all do nothing? The fuck? I don't understand. There is a standoff. Frances is arrested, again screaming that this happened because no one would protect the nut bitch. And as we can tell, Shauna would survive. She was in critical care, broke nearly every bone in her face, needed like 16 surgeries to reconstruct her nose. She would lose sight in her left eye, hearing in her left ear, but she would survive, and Dave would not. He was actually shot directly to the heart and would not make it. Haley, who had known Dave as her stepfather, he had known her since she were 2 or something like that. She was just absolutely devastated. Nigga, I was devastated. I was like, this man will not survive. It's too racist in here and he ain't been interviewed yet. And broke me. Haley was actually pregnant when Dave died, and she gave birth to her second child in the midst of all of this, which seemed to give a little glimpse of hope for the family, especially with a possible trial coming up. It was just a lot to take in. Any level of comfort was needed and welcome. Eventually, though, Shauna would essentially be given the choice of whether or not she wanted to go through trial or if she would like to essentially offer a plea deal for Frances. She conceived the idea of going through trial as another traumatizing, a re-traumatizing event. The thought of having to testify, look over Dave's dead body pictures, the crime scene, reliving that day over and over, reliving the events that led to his death, having to see her, having to possibly be cross-examined about the worst day of your life where you nearly died and lost the love of your life. Like, she didn't want to put herself or her family through all of that. They had been through enough. So she decided to not go to trial, and Frances pled guilty in 2022 to murder, second-degree assault, and wanton endangerment, for which she received 35 years with a possibility for parole starting in 2038. So 16 years from her sentencing, which doesn't sound like a lot of time for me. But also, she is old and angry, meaning that she'll either die tomorrow or live forever. There's really no in between. So we'll see. Hopefully she die. Hope she died. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, why would you wish death upon people? I wish death on many people. That can make me a bad person. I don't give a fuck. It is what it is. But yeah, just a senseless murder of a man who did nothing to nobody. Just a black man, a husband, a father, someone who wanted to keep the peace and was non-confrontational, even though this racist bitch lived across the street and wanted to cry wolf. I hope she choked. Episode 2, Midwest Meltdown. I'm not gonna lie to you, this story is very perplexing and downright sad. I had no clue where this story was going because it starts off with what seems to be a bomb going off in like a suburban development. I'm like, that is some crazy shit. Your neighbor making bombs? And though that's not exactly what happened, kind of. Richmond Hill, Indiana is where the story takes place. And this is where we learn of a woman named Monsi who would move into the social, friendly, close-knit neighborhood with her husband and daughter. Monsi was from Puerto Rico. She was a nurse. And it was pretty clear from the jump that Monsi was, again, very social. She fit in with the area in that way. She liked the finer things in life, but was also very generous and hospitable. She would cook for the neighbors all the time. There was one neighbor she was so close to that she would call to their family basically every night to bring them over for dinner. Her kid would play with the neighborhood kids. They would hang out. She seemed to fit right in with the energy of the area. But a few years after she moved in 2009, she would get a divorce from her husband. She would decide to stay in the house in Richmond Hill, which is interesting because it was quite large for at that point, one adult woman and a child. But afterwards, she was planning to have, for all intents and purposes, a hoe phase. She was dipping in and doing it, which is fine. You can do whatever the fuck you want. She's a grown woman. I have my concerns about bringing a bunch of people around your child and around your home because that's just generally not safe. But if you be safe, be a hoe, do it. But the friend that used to come over all the time and eat with them all the time and had a very like ingratiated family dynamic with her, she had to have her space because they were just in very different places at this point. The woman was also quite Christian, and so she out there being a hoe. She didn't know nothing about that. They kind of drifted. 2 years after the divorce, Monsi would bring some dude named Mark around, and Mark looked greasy. He had frosted tips in 2011. That's dated for 2011. What are you, in sync, bitch? What the fuck? The friend that had drifted apart from her, she would see this guy moving furniture in or moving furniture out or something, you know. And Monty was like, this is Mark. He's such a great guy and he makes so much money, which is a wild ass thing to say. Like, it was literally, this is Mark. he got money. And that's it.
He's an amazing guy, and he makes so much money. That was her big thing. He makes so much money.
Apparently they had met in a bar. Despite having met only a few weeks ago, he was already moving into Monsi's house after such a short time. Again, y'all love moving niggas into your house that you met 3 days ago. I don't understand why y'all do that, especially because if he's so rich, why does he need to move in with you? He ain't hard up. You ain't hard up. You got your divorce settlement. You in this big ass house. Why are we rushing to live together? Also, if he's so rich, why ain't you moving in with him? It don't make no sense. He also had an ankle bracelet, which isn't jewelry. It was pretty clear, bad vibes with this Mark guy. And everybody was like, oh yeah, we gonna stay away. They would be out in public, out in the yard and shit, making out all hard and shit. Like, ugh, we don't need to see all that. He was on his motorcycle, living out they like 1980s fantasy of I'm in the back by his motorcycle. It was weird. Also, there was a lot more people coming and going from the house. She had a lot more traffic than she ever did before. So it was just, the vibes were weird. We then step back a little bit and we meet a woman named Joanne who once dated Mark. She was a widow when they met, and they met on a dating site. He presented himself a man that was chivalrous and had money. If there was ever a bill with them together, she would never have to pick it up. And apparently things were good at first. Usually one would hope it's good at first. Damn, when is it gonna be good? Some of you niggas be having terrible relationships from the jump, and I'm like, why? There's nothing to lose. You don't know him. Drop it. Within 3 months of dating, he started acting real weird, real stressed out. Basically, he would say to Joanne, hey, my construction job, somebody stole very expensive equipment worth $300,000, and I found some replacement equipment, but I need $10,000 to get it. And again, let's go back to our Danish deception thing. Why are you rich but need $10,000 from me? Make that make sense. How are you? Yeah, I'm that nigga. You will never have to pick up a check around me. But $10,000 in the grand scheme of ballin' rich nigga shit is not that much money. Why do you need $10,000 from me? But lo and behold, here he is asking her for $10,000, which she was not going to give at first. But unfortunately, she went to church and the sermon was about generosity. Give to the you want the blessing returned by the and so she gives this man $10,000 with a promissory note that he would pay her back. And the next thing you know, that nigga gone, bitch. He is gone. He's gone. He don't answer her texts. He don't answer her calls. Next thing you know, she getting a call from someone saying they his friend and that he want to break up with her and that this friend is gonna break up with her on his behalf. And she's like, bitch, I don't give a fuck. We don't have to date. Where the fuck is my money? And so she goes to small claims court where she finds out that, yeah, you can file this, but you gotta wait behind the 3 other people that have active lawsuits against this man. Mark was a con man. By trade, it would seem. As I understand it, she just kind of chalked it up to the game and went about her life, which at that point, they cut your losses. So we learn Mark has a history of not being a great guy. So let's fast forward to November 2012, where around 11 p.m. at night, Monsi's house would explode. Not just a little explosion, not just a part of the house, the entire house would explode. Many of the neighbors around the house would get trapped under drywall, roofs, brick, wood. Luckily, a lot of the neighbors that heard the explosion but were not directly injured, they were able to be first responders, saving people, pulling them out of the rubble. And they interviewed several of the people who were under rubble and explained their stories. And that was just, that was harrowing. We all have our things, right? Something about a story about being trapped under stuff. Can't do it. Whenever you hear them stories of like people going into the little caves underwater and shit for no reason, and then they get stuck in that's fine. You can keep that. You could have kept that story. I didn't need to know. You were dumb. This is not that situation, but also like the story of being stuck and confined and can't breathe and suffocate, like that shit is harrowing for me. One woman would even talk about how she was trapped under something and a firefighter was trying to get her out. And she remembers hearing people outside screaming, leave her, you gotta go.
And I hear somebody outside the house yelling that, and their exact words was, you have to leave her and get out now.
I understand your sentiment. Obviously, the place is on fire and he would die too. But If I survive and I found out you told them to leave me, I'm beating your ass. I'm beating your ass with every fiber that's left of me. If I only got one leg afterwards, I'm beating you with the other one. I'm gonna figure it out. So that was incredibly disturbing, but the most disturbing part was hearing the voice of a man named Dion as he called 911 for assistance. And they didn't have to put that in there for me. They could have kept that out. I didn't need to hear his voice because he and his wife Jennifer would pass away, burned alive in the explosion. Hearing his panic was too much for me personally. Maybe that makes me a bit of a hypocrite, like, because true crime is true crime. It's like real experiences, but that was a lot for me. It kind of felt like how I felt when I was talking about that documentary, The Perfect Neighbor, incidentally. I was talking about how that one is like, it was too much for me. That was a little haunting. There were so many people injured, 2 lives lost, houses exploded, like so many houses, like 30 houses were damaged, 18 super fucked up, caught on fire. What the fuck happened? Also, are Monsi and her family okay? Well, also conveniently, Monsi and Mark were out of town at a casino. Her daughter and Kat were also out of the house. Luckily, they had been getting taken in, babysat, cat sat, or whatnot. And she was made aware of this, while she was on her little excursion for the weekend. And she came back quickly, devastated at the loss of her home and the loss of 2 lives and the loss of her neighborhood. She was just horrified. Initially, it was believed that the explosion was natural gas related because why else would a house spontaneously combust, Certainly, it was an accident, but pretty quickly, when any investigation is done by anyone who has any professional knowledge of explosions and stuff like that, they started to notice some fishy shit. 1, there wasn't no furniture in the house. Furniture doesn't just vaporize in an explosion. There would be armchairs, there would be tables, there would be remnants of those things, and there just wasn't any. 2, and more suspiciously, the step-down valve and the Dante valve of the gas fireplace had been removed. Basically, these are the valves that regulates the flow of gas coming into the house. Basically, there was no regulation on the gas at all. They had been purposely removed. 3, a metal bottle that seemed to have been filled with lighter fluid was inside of a destroyed, completely torn apart microwave. And they were pretty clear that the microwave was the source of the explosion. They also figured out that, I don't know how they did this, but they were able to figure out what model microwave it was and was able to show that it had a delayed start feature, which would explain how someone hypothetically could microwave a bottle of lighter fluid while outside of the home. It was pretty clear at this juncture that this is not an accident. This is a crime scene and a murder investigation at that. So they started interviewing people who would end up saying that they saw a white van outside of the house the day of the explosion. And though Mark and Monsi were outside of the house, had a very convenient alibi, we was over at the casino at a much farther away town than they would have been in. It was still suspicious because they went to the casino and they ended up looking at the security footage. And basically all it did was show that they were there for quite a little while, but didn't really play anything, didn't really do anything. They didn't have a room for the night, which is like, why would you drive, 2-3 hours away from your house to not stay anywhere unless you knew you would be notified that your house blew up and that you have to come back? Exactly. So they would also get more information from a local bar owner that would say that essentially Mark had a brother named Bob who he had met and realized would have been capable in some way of participating in the scheme to blow up the house. There's a lot of minutia, but essentially Bob, who is real funny looking, he looked like Magneto. My nigga got me watching X-Men 97, and it's pretty good. I ain't gonna be a hater about it, but that's what I saw. Anyway, essentially Bob was in town and he'd be able to set it to delay start while Mark and Monsi were out of town. And so they were able to bring in the 3 suspects, arrest them around Christmas. And Monsi's lawyer would offer to give more information from Monsi if that meant that she got a lighter sentence. So we'd find out some more specific information about the case from there. Namely, that this wasn't their first attempt at blowing up the house. Oh, no. They had done it 2 other times, in which for the last 3 weeks, they had gone to the casino, boarded their cat, had their child babysat. And the final attempt is when they started pouring literal gasoline on the problem to ensure that when the time came, it would kaput. If you're wondering why anyone would do this, of course it's for the insurance money. $300,000. It was an insurance scam for the house. Monsi would say that she didn't expect the explosion to be as large as it was, and that Mark had convinced her that it would be small. And it did seem that the jury would believe that Mark was more of the mastermind. He has the long time history of being a career criminal. They would all be found guilty. Bob would get charged with felony murder, arson, and would receive 2 life sentences without parole plus 70 years. Mark would get 2 consecutive life sentences, which I guess is different. What difference does it make? You only live once. Sorry, I had an idea of like he died and they dig his ass back up and say, do it again. Mark would get 2 consecutive life sentences plus 75 years, but would die of natural causes in 2018. And Monsi would plead guilty to conspiracy to commit arson and would get 50 years, which given her age is basically life. Some neighbors would leave the area, some would stay, but ultimately, as you can imagine, it really tainted the overall area. But if anything, the knowledge that neighbors were able to come together and save lives that night, I guess, is some consolation. But girl, fuck y'all. Fuck that Monsi bitch. Fuck the frosted tip nigga Mark and his weird, ugly brother. Episode 3, Fear Thy Neighbor. God, this one is a doozy. Of course, so are the other ones. Lives were lost, traumatic. You get it. But there's something, wasn't shit fun about any of this, but there's something in particular about the combination of like grotesque police incompetence, the pointlessness of the tragedy, the just of it all, but I do my job. All right. So Miles and Melina are a Black couple that moved into Eastmont Hills, California in 2017, blending their families. They had both been married prior to this, and together they had 4 children in total. They wanted to move into a very diverse community, and this area was that. It was middle class. It was not the safest, but not the least safe. It had character, it had community, and they were really excited and they really fell in love with the house that they ended up finding there. We learn about Miles, who seems to be a very cool, humble, sweet guy. The family is Christian and they have quite a community in their church. They seem to be a happy family and they seem to really get along with their neighbors. Speaking of which, they had a neighbor to their left, and that was the Thomas family. As I understand it, there was a husband and a wife, and they had 2 adult children that would also live there. Their youngest son was named JT, and he would stay in the detached garage behind the house. He seemed to be pretty well known around the neighborhood. They would see him riding his bike. He was very chill. Everybody knew him. They got along with him. If he saw Miles while he was doing lawn work, he would say, hey, for a few bucks, I can help you out. And so they would do that. And he seemed to really get along with the community. He seemed nice, pleasant, and again, quite a component of the community. About 2 years after moving in, the Thomas family would be forced to move out of their home because they were renting, and they had been renting for about 30 years, and the owner of the home actually passed away. And so in their passing, the properties they owned were liquidated, and so the family would be evicted. It was incredibly sad, and the family had to figure out what to do. The parents, I believe, thought they were going to move in with a friend, or the wife, maybe the father had passed away, I'm not sure, was going to move in with a friend, but she wasn't quite sure what her sons were going to do. A new buyer for the house would come by, and they would find out that they were essentially going to flip the house, so it would be empty for a while as they found somebody to rent it in the springtime. So the house was empty, but eventually Miles and Melina would start seeing JT sneaking around the back of the house to stay in the garage again, and he was squatting. At some point, the new owners would come by, notice his items, his belongings there, a mattress, a broken fence that he must have broken to get in, and Miles would confirm to them, like, yeah, we've seen JT sneaking around the back out there. The new owner was like, hey, dude, let us know if you see him because he's not supposed to be here, which, yeah, he don't live there no more. You gotta go. But on Thanksgiving 2019, JT just woke up mad. He would come to their house banging on their door, slurring his words, presumably on something, some substance, complaining about their dog. They had a boxer, I believe. He said that their dog was barking and it was disturbing him, even though he wasn't supposed to be at that property. And so it gets heated and Miles is like, get the fuck out of my house, get the fuck off my property, get the fuck out of here. And thus begins JT's obsession with this couple, who did nothing to him. He starts banging on their doors, ringing their doorbell at all hours of the night, ding dong ditching. And it started to scare them, scare their children, as you can imagine, all hours of the night, just banging on the door, ringing the doorbell. That's fucking terrifying. And Melina wanted to call the police and get them involved immediately. But Miles is like, hey, let's pray for him. Obviously, he's going through a rough time. He just lost his house. He's not in his right mind. He's on drugs. And all of those things could be true. And also, not that it would fucking matter if you call it the police, because as we're about to find out, they didn't do shit anyway. But by December, JT's throwing rocks, bricks, and other objects through their windows. Melina would actually be injured by shattered glass in one of these instances, and she would call the police. Well, they were basically like, did anyone die? Did he shoot you? Oh, it was a rock? Okay, well, let us know when you're dead.
And all they kept saying was, ma'am, like, we're shots fired, we're shots fired. And I was just like, I don't know.
Even worse, this was happening, and Melina was like 8 weeks pregnant. So it was very early, and this stress obviously could not be good for a pregnancy of any length. Eventually, Miles would contact the owner of the house and basically say, hey, things are escalating with this man who is squatting at your property. He is your responsibility. You have to do something about that. Also, when they started calling the police on him, it would take them 2-3 hours to get around there. And by the time that happened, JT gone. So thanks for helping. I'm sure you guys will step into action when we're already fucking dead. The homeowner would come actually run JT off the property himself. But in a way, JT associated the owner with Miles. So things only escalated more beyond that, even though Miles didn't do anything other than be harassed by you. Again, similar to the first fucking story. So Miles started to guard the house with a bat and his dog. And I'm like, skip all that, get a gun. I'm gonna just be very real with y'all. I'm not a gun girl. I don't like guns around me. I've seen very few guns in person. I would not like to see another one. But there are situations that I've recognized the reality that at some point, if necessary, I gotta get that blick on me. I pray that situation never exists and never gets called for. But the system gonna jam me up, but this trigger finger won't. Whenever someone says like, oh, so-and-so couldn't kill a person, I believe everyone is possible. Everyone has the capability. Believe in yourself a little more. God, I remember, this is so off topic. There was this girl that gave a whole story about how she doesn't like guns and she doesn't want them in her life. But essentially, the police failed to protect her when she was getting stalked and he tried to break into her house. So she had to shoot his ass in the ass or something. And then people were like, well, I bet you're happy you had a gun. No, I'm unhappy that I was forced to do the job that supposedly y'all are supposed to do. And that's how I feel about it. If you feel like you need a bat, get a gun. Skip the step. Just go straight to the gun. They would also get a restraining order against him, which the police were very slow to respond to when he showed up again, even though they were 2 blocks away. It would take them 3 billion years to come and answer. One day in early 2020, Miles would be arguing with JT and a patrol car would break them up. And this is the first time that the police had been there while JT was there. They said they have an acting restraining order and that he should not be here. And basically, the police officer scolds them like children, scolds Miles like they're acting like little girls and can't like stop bickering. Sir, we have an active restraining order on this man. Me fighting with him isn't a spat. He shouldn't be here. He doesn't live here. And what's worse is that they take in JT and he says on his body cam, I'm going to kill him the next time I see him.
Guys, I'll be right back. Next time, we'll kill next time.
AKA a threat. They arrest him for said threat and let him out 2 days later. They also don't notify Miles and Melina that he is now free. So he just riding his bike through the street 48 hours after threatening to kill him. He was also already on probation. He was on the highest level of supervised probation, which was not considered at all when they decided to release him. His probation officer was also not notified that he had been released or that he had been arrested. None of that happened. None of the due process or whatever the fuck they be talking about happened. In part, this is because of COVID. People were being let out for fear of people getting sick or just having too many people like locked up and being understaffed and yada, yada, yada. I don't give a fuck. Your job So no, it's not. They say it is, but no, it's not. It's to protect property. They don't even protect property, Will. They're like, we protect and serve something, I guess, when we feel like it. I don't know. So anyway, JT was out and about. Not only that, he was out and about with the understanding that he wouldn't get arrested. And if he was arrested, he wouldn't be there long. So what did he do? Turn that shit up, baby. He started breaking windows every other night, sometimes throwing rocks directly at pregnant Melina. Miles would reach out to JT's parole officer, and he didn't do shit. The police didn't look him up. They didn't ping him. They didn't try to find his ass. They were just like, oh, he gone. Next time when we get here 6 hours late, we'll see if he's still in the exact same spot. Basically, their excuse was that, this beat is very busy. There's a lot that goes on, a lot of crime. So y'all are our least important thing on our radar. Great. Again, as I've joked darkly about in this series of events, the subtitle of Police, we'll do our job when you're dead. Probably not even then. Or Police, we'll do the job if you finished it already. It continues today. At this point, JT had broken their window 23 times in total. Eventually, they would board up the house, but being that it was the middle of COVID, they couldn't go anywhere and they were locked in this house that they loved that had quickly been turned into a shanty. They also couldn't look out of the windows, and JT was screaming, threatening that he was going to burn the house up. So now they can't even see him on the other side. And at their wits' end, they finally decide to move. They had loved the neighborhood. They had found the house that they wanted to raise their kids in. And this nigga, again, woke up and decided, I won't let you know peace. And so they finally decide, enough of this shit, we getting out. So they move out. They move into an apartment. They didn't want to move, but they were like, wow, we're out. This is so nice. All this peace. Oh my God. And the only things that they really had to do at the old house was decorate it and prepare it for being sold. But May 1st, 2020, Miles would go to the home with some of the neighbor friends from there and go to plant some flowers or something in the house. And JT would come upon Miles chasing after him and shoot him dead in the street multiple rounds. I started to break down because Melina described being at work earlier in the day. She was a little annoyed at him, so he went to kiss her, and she said, no, I don't want to kiss. And he went off to work, and he said, well, I love you anyway. And then while she was at work, she could feel he was there, and then he was gone before she was notified. And she would rush out, go to the house. There were police there. They sprung into action then. Thanks, man. A coroner van was there, and she sees the face of so many police officers that she had called time and time again, seen them so often that they recognized their faces. And those people who did nothing while she begged for help are putting her dead husband in the truck. Now y'all want to spring in action now that this innocent man is already dead. Cool. They would find JT within a few hours. They just pinged his phone, a thing they had not tried this entire time, mind you. Any of the times he had been assaulting them, they never thought to ping his phone, or just didn't feel like it. They're like, we don't feel like doing that. And they found him at a hotel, and charged him with murder in the first degree. And he was sentenced to 28.8 years to life. What the fuck was that deal like? Did he plead guilty? I don't know how he was able to get parole with that, but Melina would sue the county, basically wanting to do a public announcement that the police had failed her family, that no matter how short-staffed they were, all of this was preventable if any of you did your job well. She would sue the city and the county, and she would win the suit after a few years, and they would pay out a little under $3 million for their negligence, but I'm sure she would give it back if that meant she could have her husband back. They were moving. They were out. They were out of the house. They were just coming to plant some fucking flowers, nigga. Ugh. And then his church group would come and finish decorating the house in his memory, finishing his work. There was just a lot in this last bit of this episode. There was just y'all punch me in every emotion I got. Oh my God, I can't do this. Melina again was pregnant. She would give birth to a baby girl named Ava 2 months after he was killed. And she would talk about how grateful she was that she had his eyes, so it felt like a part of him was still with her. And then they showed a little baby. She come down and I love you. And I'm like, take the baby away. I can't cry no more. But the final straw for me was when they had his mama. She was, he was her only son, and they had noticed that they talked to each other every Tuesday. And so since he's died, she writes a letter to him every Tuesday.
At some point, Miles and I realized that we always spoke on Tuesdays, and that gave me the idea. I think I'll start writing to Miles every Tuesday.
And she reads one of them, and that fucking broke me. I'm trying not to cry because I spent a long time on this eyeshadow, and the police didn't do shit. I need a minute. Where my Q-tip? Where my Wendy Williams Q-tip? Episode 4. The Executor. This episode is fucking weird. It's about an elderly man named Charles who would go missing. But once we uncover that, we also uncover this very convoluted and weird sequence of events and lies and fraud. And it's just very strange. So this takes place in LA, in one of those like richer neighborhoods of it, an apartment townhouse complex type place. There was a woman named Carrie, and she, according to her neighbors, works in trusts, wills, and probate. And she was relatively nice. They usually are at first, but this area seemed to be more like me. They don't really talk to their neighbors that much. So they was like, she was fine. She didn't bother me. And that's all I asked for. But as we would find out, the person that she was working for, supposedly, is a man named Charles. But in 2020, Charles's neighbors would call to see if he was okay. They hadn't seen him recently, and they would call the police for a wellness check. He was quite reclusive and didn't really hang out with people anyway. But when you notice that that guy that you don't see anyway very often is still noticeably absent, probably best to see if you're all right. When police get there, they are met by Carrie, who would claim that she was the successor trustee of his estate and that Charles was actually out of town. And so she takes care of his homes and properties and finances in his stead. The police go in to make sure that he isn't inside. She does warn him that the house is in complete disarray. They go in. It is gross, but no Charles. Eventually, though, they would get a call from a man who claimed he was Charles over the phone and would close their case. But in 2021, someone else would contact homicide and suggest that maybe Charles had been murdered and that someone was misappropriating his funds. So homicide decided to look more into it. Charles was an only child of a very affluent family. He never married, had no kids, and ultimately spent his entire life in his childhood home. He was reclusive, but generally pleasant. Again, he lived with his parents until they passed away, and his estate was worth millions of dollars. And if Carrie were indeed his trustee, she would have complete control over his accounts for his well-being. At least that's what the idea of the position is. The investigator that was investigating Charles's disappearance would contact Carrie and ask for his address out of town, and just generally felt quite suspicious of her and was hoping to get that address that he's staying at out of town within 24 hours. He gets in contact with someone again claiming to be Charles, gave a new number, the address where he was staying, and the officer didn't believe him. So he went to the address, and lo and behold, Charles isn't there. It is some random man who seems a bit nervous, and he's like, oh yeah, I knew Charles, but he hasn't been here recently. Back to Carrie's apartment. Her neighbors would start to notice a change around the building. Again, this is a little affluent LA apartment complex situation, and she started having some real rough looking people around. They were doing drugs on the stoop. Some of them had prison tattoos. Niggas had ankle bracelets. She got a new roommate that looked like she was, very heroin chic or just on heroin. And they would be banging music throughout the night. One of the neighbors would overhear her and one of the other people in there saying to, quote, grab the meth.
And I can hear her say, oh, look, there's more meth over there. Grab the meth.
Through the shared wall. Another neighbor would say that thousands of dollars worth of packages would go missing. And they like, whoa, who is this bitch that we live next to? Oh my God. Well, to answer that question, we meet a woman named Dusty. Dusty had been friends with Carrie back in 2002. And at the time, Dusty was married to a famous film director, and Carrie wanted to be an actress. Eventually, Dusty would divorce her husband and for some reason let Carrie handle it, though she wasn't a lawyer. This made no sense to me. I ain't gonna lie to you. Absolutely no sense. But essentially, Dusty would say that she would start giving her legal advice. And then one day, Carrie woke up and sent her an invoice for $152,000 for said legal advice. Dusty said, bitch, I ain't paying you nothing. What are you talking about? Also, what are you suing me for? Bitch, you can't sue somebody for non-legal legal support? Like, nah, bitch, what are you talking about? You can't charge for legal support when you're not a lawyer, you weird bitch. But she tried to sue her for not paying for her legal advice that she couldn't give. She tried to sue her and her soon-to-be ex-husband for that. And luckily, the judge read that and threw it out because, again, you can't sue somebody for non-legal legal advice, you weird bitch. We say all this to say that you get a sense of the type of person Carrie seems to be. Stupid, a con artist. So back to Charles. Carrie would claim that she was a friend of his deceased mother who had gotten her involved to take care of Charles with his finances once she were to pass away. Again, he didn't have children. At that point, both of his parents would be deceased. And Carrie seemed to have an answer for everything when police came to investigate. She had papers, she had signed trusts, but the police officer would notice a bill for a new phone that just so happened to have the same number that was given to him by that man claiming to be Charles over the phone a few days ago. The police would ask Carrie to call Charles again right in front of them, to which there was no answer. Eventually, they would dig deeper into these trust papers that she presented, only to discover that they were fake. They were a forgery. And again, Charles hadn't been seen. But being that this man works in homicide, he's like, I'm going to bring in the feds to look into the white collar wire fraud parts of this. Back to Carrie in her apartment, she would get kicked out for not paying rent. And again, that's on top of all the complaints from the meth, the loud partying, the concerning behavior. You know, her neighbors were very happy to see her ass go. And you're not paying rent? Get the fuck out. She would move into a house in a different part of LA. And upon meeting her new neighbors there, she would let them know that she planned to open a sober living facility. They were a little concerned. They were like, oh, this is a residential place. We don't tend to have like sober living. This is like a cul-de-sac. You gonna open a sober living? Okay, well, But the neighbor was like, oh, maybe, we don't know. Maybe, we don't know. We'll come to find out that house that she bought was with Charles's estate money. The feds would discover that Carrie is spending his money, which is not her job. Her job is to spend money on him, like the things that he needs, his expenses, but not on herself. And they would soon find out that she had been kicked out of her apartment and was running a quote sober living facility at some new house that they found out that Charles's estate was paying for. Also didn't seem to be very sober. They were partying a lot, drinking a lot, trash all over the front yard, constantly smelled of marijuana at all times of the night. Apparently one dude had passed out at the front wheel of his car. Luckily it wasn't moving, but he was slumped over the steering wheel. And eventually the new house would get raided because there's a vibe. This bitch it's not a vibe. We have evidence that she is misappropriating funds at this point. So they raid the house. There they would find her house is decked out for Rico shit. She got guns, rifles, many of which are untraceable, meth, cocaine, scales and baggies, fake police badges, bank statements from Charles's mother, also evidence that she planned to do this to other estates. Of course, she was arrested. They were much quicker at getting the white collar crime than when they were calling to save a black man. I noticed. But again, we still haven't found Charles. In custody, Carrie would say a bunch of bullshit. She would say that he didn't want to be found, that he might be out there living as a woman, but he had been missing for 2 years at this point, and it was pretty clear that Charles was dead. The police believed he was dead. And over the course of him being gone, she had stolen, give or take, $600,000 using fake trust accounts that she had created. On one account, she had a co-account holder with a career criminal named Jason. And so they would arrest him, interview him about his relationship with Carrie. I don't know, probably in a plea deal or something, he decides to give all the information that he has, or at least says he's giving all the information that he has. And he would tell police that they had both met because they do meth. I mean, I guess similar circles, like you end up meeting everybody that does meth once you do meth. It's a meth spidey sense. Methed in. Anyway, Jason would say that he was looking for a house to burglarize when he found Charles's house. He would break in, and when he got inside, he found Charles dead. He had been dead for a while. He was on the floor. He seemed to have died of natural causes, and he was decomposing, so much so that he was melting into the carpet, and there were rats in his mouth. Sorry. And despite how disgusted he was by this, he thought this was a perfect opportunity to do more crime, because now we have this big ass, rich ass house, a dead guy, and a bunch of documents that we could use to forge as if this man is still alive and keep collecting his rich money riches. And so immediately he calls Carrie to work together to start a fraud scheme using any important documents that they could find in his house. Jason would say that Carrie would dispose of the body. He said he had nothing to do with it. And unfortunately, it sounds like he really did have nothing to do with it. I don't know about y'all, but I wouldn't take it upon myself to dispose of the body, but okay. They would end up interviewing her and she would tell her side of the story, again, in an effort to get a lighter sentence, where she goes into specifics. And it was some real Breaking Bad shit. Apparently, the body was still there when police had done their initial search looking for him. It was in the house, but the house was such a mess and so fucked up that they couldn't tell that a dead body was particularly what was causing the horrible smell. And she would take the body and Breaking Bad style get a tub and acid and try to melt him in it on the roof of her apartment before she got evicted. And apparently she had him in that barrel for about a week, just on the roof. Everybody else going about their day. They go home, come back from work, they play and Scrabble with their kids and shit. And this bitch is melting a man on the roof. She said at some point it started eating through the tub, so she had to drain it. And so this is not funny. She drains it from the tub through a hose that goes 3 floors down to the garden in the back. And nobody smelled that? Like, they did smell it once you start leaking that shit down to the garden. But y'all ain't smell his body prior to that? That's just normal smells to y'all, just average garbage. Okay. She would bemoan how the bones didn't dissolve, so that she would have to dismember him again on the roof. And her neighbors would complain about, you know, how loud she was recently. So much banging, and we assumed she was moving furniture or something. Anyway, long story short, she got the body and she went on a friend's boat and threw it overboard. Her assistant also helped in some way. Spoiler, the assistant didn't get no charges. I don't know how she got away with that. I think she didn't know it was a body, but how couldn't you? You don't smell it? But she didn't get no charges. Anyway, Carrie pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud, got 20 years, and was ordered to pay $3.8 million to her victims, which are who at this point? Everybody dead. Who's she gonna pay it to? He didn't have no kids. He didn't have no family. I guess her neighbors that had to smell it. I don't know. And Jason also pled guilty for conspiracy and possession to distribute methamphetamine and got 16 years plus 8 months and $1.9 million in restitution. Y'all will never see that. They both just weird ass niggas who are in jail for now. Weird ass niggas in a weird ass case. Good. Finn. So yeah, that's Worst Neighbor Ever Season 1. What are your thoughts? Did it hit you the way it hit me? They all hit me differently, but episode 3 got me. That one left me. And so did 1 too. Again, mind your own business. Some nut wake up and say, you're the problem. And then here we go. Oh, man. My computer's about to die, so I'm going to close this out. If you liked today's video, feel free to like today's video. Follow me on my social media, Instagram, Bluesky, both of which are KennieJD. Follow me on Twitch and my Twitch VOD channel, both of which are NotKennieTV. And if you didn't know, me and my friend Olay have a podcast called Olay and Kennie, which you can check out as well. As of filming, we have 2 episodes up. And if you want to hear us yickety yakety yak and chitty chat, you should do that. Rhymed. But yeah, I'm bummed out, so I'm going to go to bed now. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.